Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the PPM Summit. And I'm so excited to have our next speaker present a case study. The topic is driving successfully complex portfolio through failures and additional challenges posed by COVID-19. So I know we are all curious to know about the experiences, and this is absolutely absolutely relevant. Let me present you Salman, our speaker. Salman Saif is with UCB as director, head of strategic planning and operations in epilepsy franchise. He has over 12 years in pharma and healthcare, driving commercial, business, and development strategies and strategic operations through effective strategy building, clear alignment between strategy and operations, and ensuring excellence through end-to-end program and portfolio management. With this, let's move straight, and I give the floor to Salman.
Thank you, Mithun. Very happy to be here. As you said, so I'll be talking next 20 minutes or so, sharing our experience on driving the portfolio through different challenges and failures, and also the additional complexities we saw over last 1 year in the shape of Corona. So just to put a disclaimer, so these would be like my view and opinions and not necessarily endorsed by my company, right? How I was thinking I would take you through, it's basically the three dimensions that you see on my screen. First, I would touch on the key strategic dimensions when we talk about or think about portfolio strategy. Then we would go through a few drivers which will help us navigate through the challenges or different constraints. And then lastly, how we define the success. So we can have some kind of parameters to see that how we are doing. So let's jump into that. So when I say key strategic vectors, what I mean with that. So first thing, for when we talk about portfolio strategy, obviously you start with portfolio. And here by portfolio, what I mean, it's your existing products, drugs, molecules, which you have currently part of your portfolio, and there a company basically consider or ask question how differentiated they are compared to the competitive landscape. What is their patient value or added value now or in a near or midterm? So portfolio, I would describe it's something current, something which you have in hand or which you have in late stage, which is coming through your pipeline early on in a way that in next few years. But what I want to emphasize, and that would be my next key strategic vectors or dimensions, that when you think about portfolio strategy, it's much beyond than your current portfolio itself. If I click next, so my next which I want to put forward, it's innovation. So when you think about portfolio strategy, then you should also think about innovation. And by innovation, what I mean, it's more future. So what kind of drug, products, assets you have in your early stage pipeline that fit to your strategy and landscape. And practical example could be that, let's say you are a leader, or UCB is a leader in epilepsy disease area today, but then we have to think from now that how we can be the leader in next 5 years, 10 years, or 10 plus years. So that means you have to go really beyond your existing portfolio and think that what's coming through the innovation that can still make your portfolio attractive, make your portfolio differentiated, and addressing the patient needs for the future. And it's very interesting concept that you have to really think about the future when you don't have to, which means that you have to think about next steps when you are most comfortable in your existing situation. What happens at a personal level and the same at a company level also, that the companies become very comfortable if you have a very rich existing portfolio and not necessarily investing a lot in the future. So hence the emphasis to highlight this dimension. Then the third dimension I want to highlight, it's digital, right? And by digital, what I mean that, you have all those tool techniques, but I want to emphasize here, like anything on digital that help to create a patient experience through connected care for your portfolio. And why I am emphasizing that, because more we see that from the recent past, and the trend would be ongoing in the future more and more, is that how you can transform the patient experience and how the digital tools or techniques or algorithms could help doing that. Again, one example being that, if a, a diagnose takes like 3-4 iteration, or a patient has to try 3-4 drugs to reach towards the right diagnose, how the digital techniques or algorithm through collecting of the patient information can help you to predict what's the right diagnose, how we can go into more like a precision medicine in that sense. So I want to emphasize that digital is much more than just the tools and techniques that helps us in communication, but like here I mean the techniques, the tool or artificial intelligence or advanced analytics that help you to predict the outcome, hence improve the patient journey. If I move next, my key strategic vector, which I want to emphasize, it's the sustainability dimension, right? So which is becoming more and more important, as you may agree with me, in last years. And the concept is that the companies who are operating within a context, within a society, they have to share the value they are generating. If the value is only shared by your stakeholders, your shareholders, or your board members, that's not enough for the future, which means that we need to drive the sustainable access. We need to make our drugs and products available for those who may not be able to afford that. So we need to think about those dimensions or those innovative pathways so that we can create a difference in people's life, hence making the value and sharing the value that we are creating as a company. My last dimension in terms of a strategic or a strategy planning in a way for portfolio strategy, and this I call more like strategic enabler. uh, and the previous ones you saw, I was calling them more like dimensions or vectors. And why I call it enabler, because this, which I call ways of working, touch every dimensions to what I have explained you so far. And why? Because especially in this environment that even requires much more collaboration and transversal links. Because if you have to work on your portfolio, which is the current product, then you have to link with the innovation, which means your early part of the organization or science and research. Then you have to think about the digital dimension, and then as well on the sustainability dimension. So that by definition tells you that there are different pieces of puzzle, and then how you can link them together, it's through your ways of working to be more inclusive and be more transversal. If I summarize my first section of the presentation, which I call, what are the key strategic vectors or drivers that every company should at least give a thought when they are thinking about, portfolio strategy and how they will drive this portfolio strategy in the future. We talked about portfolio itself, then we talked about innovation, then we talked about digital dimension, then we talked about sustainability, and lastly we said ways of working. It's more like enabler for all of them. And then there could be some other practical themes and ideas like collaboration, partnerships, business development, acquisitions. These could also be different kind of enablers for your strategy. Now let's move to the second theme of my presentation. So let's say now with these dimensions, we are able to set our short, mid, and long-term portfolio strategies. So we know what are the rules of the games. We have alignment with our stakeholders inside the company and outside the company, that what are the trade-off at a strategic level that we want to play when a decision has to be made. Next is that how we address the challenges that will come along the way. So my first point on this theme is that to define the right sequence. And by the right sequence, people will understand it differently based on their circumstances. You could really think about short term, what I do first, what I do second for next 3 months, next 6 months, next 1 year, more like at operational level, how you can set the priorities. But then you can also expand and think about more long term when it comes to portfolio, which means that do I focus on digital now, or is it more a midterm and a long term question? Do I emphasize on a cross company or collaboration or acquisition into my portfolio now, or is it more like a mid or long term question? And the same, do we put more resources and emphasis on innovation now, based on where we are in terms of our portfolio maturity, or again is a more mid and long term? So defining the right sequence is key, because then you can break your challenges into different time span, and then you can address them. If you try to do everything at the same time, that's worst, so you won't be able to solve any of them. So the key is really to break a bigger challenge or a monster into different pieces. And so once you define those sequence, second dimension I want to bring as part of addressing the challenge, it's scenario planning. Then you are ready in terms of organization, that what could happen, what could, and again, people may take it differently depending on their context. Sometimes we do what I call sensitivity analysis, which means that you have a sequence to do things, and then you think about variations. What if there is a 3 month delay? What if there is a more cost? What if COVID adds another delay of 3 months? So these are more like what I call sensitivity analysis, which is good as well as is part of scenario planning. But then you could also take it to the next level, and the scenario planning could be that you have a mix of products in your portfolio. What if these next one fails, where you're expecting a results in next quarter or next year? How we will fill the gap in our portfolio? What if the competitor launching a drug next year or this year, it's much more adding patient value, or in terms of the efficacy or differentiation is better than you? What happens to your portfolio? Where do you stand? How your patient share will change? So you can think about very short-term operational things here, but also mid and long-term strategic thinking in terms of scenario planning. An idea here is not to make a decision, but to be ready and make your stakeholder aware what are the trade-offs, and then how, if that happens, what is our plan. And scenario planning is not always about negative things, as I was giving you the examples, if something is failed, something is not done well, but also the success. You are doing 5 trials late stage in your portfolio. What if everything is successful? Are you able to take it further or not? What kind of resources or needs that you need to build? Then obviously the next dimension is decision making. So once you have put your strategy, your trade-off, your scenario, then how, when the decision comes, what are the criteria that you would use to prioritize your investments? Again, there will be a short-term dimension, which means that what needs to be decided now for each program, each asset, each project. But then there will be a bigger, at organizational level, decision making or trade-off to optimize your portfolio. Next dimension on addressing the challenge, it's managing the risks, right? So by definition, when you have a portfolio and in development, that's my word, which means that you are bringing new drugs into the market and then trying to add more through your pipeline. By definition, you have failures as part of this process. Then how you can diversify your portfolio, how you can spread the risk or share the risk. There are different options. You could partner with the other companies. You could manage through business development or acquisition, where, so you don't have to have everything built inside your organization and be face all the risk if it happens. But the other side is that then obviously all reward is for you. So it's a question for the organization, for your organization, what is the level of acceptance of the risk that you are willing to take, hence the strategy. If you want to go very risky approach, you want to take all the reward, obviously you will go solo. But if you want to play and have more diversified approach, then obviously you look for more collaboration and then probably some acquisition or business development opportunities to diversify your portfolio and spread the risk. Then the dimension which may speak more to some of you here, it's more on the strategic planning and execution, because you could have best strategy of the word, but if there is no well-defined process, if you cannot link the word of strategy and execution, if there is no bridge, if there is a gap, then you won't achieve anything in the end. On the other side, if you have a best process of the word, but you don't have a right direction or right strategy, again, you won't be there. So I want to emphasize this link between strategy and execution, and this critical role of strategic planning and execution, where you really take the vision and then translate into the strategic priorities, roadmaps, and then really execution plans. So all those steps has to be very well or very carefully choreographed and executed afterwards. And then you have all your resourcing here, planning your tools, one source of truth, how you can bring all the organizations to have the buy-in to use the same thing so that we all have the same information, how you can bring transparency to what you do so that people have the same level of information, or how you can increase the communication. So all those themes will fall here in terms of strategic planning and execution. Lastly, in terms of addressing the challenge, I would emphasize on the resource allocation and reallocation, which means that by definition, when you have a portfolio, you will have success, you will have failure. But the challenge is that how quickly and how best you can align and realign, and how you can organize and reorganize your talent. So there are less pain, there are less frustration based on any decision that would happen in future, based on the success, but based on the failure also. So I think we don't have enough focus to spend time on these kind of things, to have this backbone which is really agile and robust when the time comes. If I summarize my second theme, so we started with defining the right sequence, then working on scenarios, and then based on scenarios, how we can make the decision. And then once we make the decision, or in parallel, how we can diversify our portfolio to manage the risk. And then how the strategic planning and execution can address the challenges. And lastly, when the decision happened, how we can allocate or reallocate resources. My third theme is defining success. There are two themes. One is a very usual one, which is the business KPIs, so which is timeline, cost, revenue. So you are familiar with that. Second is more like societal KPIs, which is more, how many patients we have impacted, like how we have improved the patient experience, how diversified or differentiated we are in terms of portfolio. So I would emphasize that the both should be looked together. Usually we only look at business KPIs and then ignore the other one. In last couple of minutes, I just want to run you through a practical example so that you don't see that what I'm telling, it's purely theoretical framework. It's a case study from UCB. Context is that, as I said, UCB is a leader in epilepsy, but with several assets, very mature, and reaching out to the expiry of their patent, which means also that there is an external environment which is evolving, and hence the need that we need to rethink that if we want to keep this leadership in the future, how we can reimagine or how we can refocus so that in 5 year, 10 year, we keep that space. And the challenge is that, as I said, that we would lose some patents in coming years. Plus, we had a big failure last year as one of the phase 2B3 program didn't deliver as per expectation. And lastly, obviously, COVID challenges which put extra pressure. What did we do? Very practically, so we did not wait for those challenges. We anticipated that. And that was the first step, which means to prioritize and define the scenario. So we put like 3 phases in our strategy. One is refocus and incubate. Second was enable and impact. And third was transform. And how we did that. So these are all the vectors on the y dimension, which I explained you that, digital portfolio innovation, and then x-axis is time horizon. So we define the sequence, how we want to tackle the problem, how we want to tackle the different scenarios and options when it comes. So, and then we try to approach the key stakeholders within the organization. So we have a full alignment. Once you reach that, second step is that from strategy to strategic roadmaps. Then based on those dimensions, we identified very clear projects and programs, what it means for a first phase, what we need to do on a digital, on portfolio, on shared value, what it means on a second phase and a third phase, so that you really translate into the next level of details. And third step was really the strategic execution. What kind of decisions we have to make and how we can make it efficiently, how we can do the agile resource allocation and reallocation, how we can do more transversal collaboration. So by putting this like 3-step approach, when we were faced difficult challenges last year, whether it was on the failure of a program, whether it was the challenges by COVID, so thanks to the foundation as a part 1 that was set up there, and the clarity as a step 2, what needs to happen, which is more prioritized versus the other, where we have more value compared to the other, we were able to handle those challenges rather rapidly. And this is my one of last slide. Like when I say the outcome was that, first, we were able to have a common vision of our long-term strategy, as the first challenge was that how we want to keep that space that we have currently in epilepsy patient share being the highest patient share for the future. Second was that we had a failure in our portfolio, but due to the trade-off already set up, we were able to do a rapid acquisition last year to fill that gap, because we couldn't wait the things to come through naturally from the early solutions or from the early pipeline. And lastly, thanks to the robust allocation reallocation frameworks that we put in place, we were able to quickly stop and start various clinical trials that were ongoing at that time and minimize the impact on in terms of the timing and on the financial delays. This is just a summary what I presented to you, and if I make an overall summary before pausing for a couple of questions. So we started with key strategic factors which impact our strategy. Then we talked about 6 ways to address those challenges, and then 2 kind of dimensions to define your success. And lastly, we see that how those was integrated into our real life UCB case study. I want to leave you with a thought that what I really liked one quote is that true superstars never just play the game, they change how the game is being played. So this is an invite to all of you that feel free to challenge yourself, your group, your organization. The option which is comfortable is to do what is already been done. So think just about portfolio, think about the execution, think about just for this month and next month, or you have a chance to really change the game. Think about the other dimensions or emerging dimensions which are becoming more and more relevant, and hence you can change the rules of the game which is being played. Thank you very much for being a very kind audience to listen to me so far. And Mithun, hand over to you. I don't know if you have a time for a quick questions, or how do you want to
So,
proceed ahead?
So, Salman, thank you for a wonderful presentation. What I really love is the way you gave us a very bird's eye view, and like a photographer, you focused on each and every element, and you made a deep dive for us. And then again, you had a brief summary of what you talked about. It really made those complex topics seem so simple and so sticky. We can remember it. I liked the fact that you mentioned that scenario planning should not only be negative. I know my colleagues, we suffer a lot on that. And I like the fact that you also mentioned that you need to address challenges, you need to reallocate resources, and you have to be agile in that. And it's not always easy. And what I find very, very innovative in your approach is that now you integrate the societal KPIs and not only focus on business KPIs. This is like, I think this is something which I will take as a main takeaway message for myself. And you should always identify challenges before they come or before you face them. Just one quick question before we go to the next panel discussion from Sylvia. How did you realize the quick stop and start of clinical trials?
Great question. No, thanks for that. So I would borrow your words, Mithun. Also, it's more anticipation, right? So when this challenge came, this COVID challenge came last year, so we didn't wait for really the official announcement or the regulatory authorities or the local or the national guidelines to come into force. We already started planning thanks to that scenario planning and anticipating that. Hence, we were able to put mitigation plans or think about the mitigation plans up front, and also uh, in a way define priorities that, okay, we have 10 trials, which ones we have to really emphasize and focus, and which one we can actually accept some delays or the consequence, and the ones which we had really a top priority, then we try to define how we can do things without being there, which means through digital means. There is a concept now doing a virtual site visits, also doing a virtual meetings that you usually do face to face, and then we assign the resources just focusing on those trials, because as I said, that the worst is that you try to do everything the same time. So the key is to prioritize, break the challenge into the pieces, and then use the available means. And in that case, it was more the digital means, and then how we can have that personal experience with those people running those trials and finding a customized solution based on each specific trial. So this was put in place, and then when things allowed, when things were a bit relaxed after the initial very severe lockdown, then the lead time was very low to pick things up, because we had already those initiatives happening. So what I'm saying is that it's not that we didn't have any impact, but we were able to really minimize the impact through this anticipation and use of some digital tools or options that were made available, but was not actually being used, or there was not a quite buy-in before COVID.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Salman, for your detailed response. So I think with this, we will move to the next session directly, and not we'll stay live. So we will need to go backstage for a minute. So, and then we'll come back with the panel. So see you in a minute.
Thank you. Bye.